This podcast is also part of a pod course, which is available for credit on speechtherapypd.com. All you need to do is register for the course, complete the requirements, and you will receive credit. Speechtherapypd.com is a video continuing education company, a certified ASHA CE provider.
Hey, are you enjoying these podcasts and pod courses sponsored by speechtherapypd.com, but are you craving a more in-depth and live-action class? Then join me Wednesday, December 5th in Parsippany, New Jersey, or Thursday, December 6th in Edison, New Jersey, or Friday, December 7th in Tinton Falls, New Jersey for a 6-hour ASHA and AOTA approved CE event, Pediatric Dysphagia, Establishing the Brain-Mouth-Gut Connection, sponsored by PESI, Inc. Don't forget to bring latex-free gloves, a snack, and a drink. We will be comedically and functionally engaging the oral preparatory stage of our swallows and sharing our joyful double chins. Be sure to check out registration on my website or Facebook page, heartwoodspeechtherapy.com, or go direct to www.pesi.com. See y'all soon. P.S. If you can't see me live in New Jersey, don't worry. I'll be in Ohio and Indianapolis in January. Thanks. Bye. Hi, folks, and welcome to First Bite, Fed, Fun, and Functional. I'm your host on this nerd venture, Michelle Dawson, MS, CCC, SLP, the All Things Peds SLP. This podcast was, like most creative processes, birthed from a combination of several cups of coffees and, honestly, even more questions posed by a series of impassioned graduate students that I've had the pleasure of supervising over the last several years. First Bite's mission? It's to answer those questions that we've all had, but we've either been too afraid to ask or we didn't have the subject matter expert saved to our own personal speed dials. So, do you too have more questions and answers when it comes to treating your medically complex and fragile pediatric patients? Are you unsure if the signs and symptoms that you're observing are indicative of an allergy, maybe an underlying GI issues, or could they possibly be neurologically driven? How many questions do you really have for that registered dietitian regarding the formulas prescribed and the flow rate through that patient's G-tube? Have you ever been consulted for a quote-unquote difficult latch only to find out that the mother's exclusively breastfeeding, but you've never nursed a little one or worked with the breastfed patient before? And what about functional communication? Are you so over flashcards, but you need advice on how to get started with core vocabulary with a non-speech generating device, or how to find the right fit for a speech generating device? Do you have additional worries about the basic day-to-day running and documentation of your private practice? How do you go about obtaining referrals or even documenting that note so that the insurance company deems it medically necessary? If you answered yes, well, then come join me, Michelle Dawson, for this dynamic podcast presented by speechtherapypd.com. Who am I, you ask? Well, I'm a self-described SLP geek with, as my family says, a touch of the ADD and ADHD. I have a passion for serving the least of these, namely the most complex and involved pediatric patients in their natural environment through my private practice, Heartwood Speech Therapy, in the Columbia, South Carolina metro area. I also have had the pleasure, and currently still am, traveling the country where I lecture on best practices for pediatric dysphagia and functional language acquisition delivered through an early intervention natural environment model. Are you still intrigued? Then come join me as I interview some amazing folks. And don't forget that you can submit questions for a Q&A or interview request topics to me via email at firstbite@speechtherapypd.com or on our Facebook page. And also check out our website. Drop a review. Subscribe to obtain those coveted ASHA CEUs. All right, folks, let's get right to it. Welcome back to First Bite, Fed, Fun, and Functional Resources for the Pediatric Clinician. I'm your host, Michelle Dawson, the All Things Peds SLP. The topic of today falls in the functional category, and we are talking all things functional communication via AAC. On that note, I am thrilled, humbled, and kind of geeking out in awe to introduce my mentor and friend, Dr. Carol Page, CCC, SLP, ATB, CBIS, and Director of the South Carolina Assistive Technology Program. Let me clear the air and openly admit that even on my best of days, I feel pretty clueless when it comes to working with little ones that need AAC. But after a few years of being mentored by her, I have a few more clues than I did before. I'm older, so I remember being taught the phenomenal attributes of pictures and Velcro. I was the queen of lamination. Then, one fateful day, a colleague told me about the South Carolina Assistive Technology Program. And being new to the state, I went on a quick road trip and met Carol. Let's just say that after 20 minutes in her presence, my mind was blown away by the concept of core vocabulary and that AAC is more than arts and crafts and hot glue guns. My biggest takeaway from her was simply, you need to start where you want to end. And that had better include core vocabulary. So on that note, let me introduce Dr. Carol Page and ask the first question that I've always wanted to know, but have been too embarrassed to ask. But as you're on your end and I'm on my end and you can't see me blushing, what in the world does the alphabet soup mean after your name?
Well, hi, Michelle. Thank you for letting me be part of this podcast. Well, first off, I have my PhD in speech language pathology, and I got it here at the University of South Carolina. And then after that, I have my Assistive Technology Professional certification, and that came from RESNA, which is the Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology Society of North America. And then the last is my certificate in brain injury as a brain injury specialist, and that came from the American Brain Injury Association.
So your geekiness rivals my own. I appreciate that. You're just more educated. I love this, but you do it with grace. Yay. Okay, so you really did whip me into shape. And when I first met you, I had come from out of state where all I knew about assistive technology was that it was kept in a cubby in the head office at the school district that I worked for. And it was a lot of shiny Big Macs. And I didn't see any iPads in there. Granted, I'm older. I'm not actually sure if iPads were there back in the day, but we were really, really encouraged to use picture exchange communication system with a whole lot of nouns. We did a whole lot of 3-ring binders. As you sort of know, but most people don't know, I'm pretty confident I'm going to go down as the only woman in history that was almost laminated to death, because when I was a speech teacher, nobody taught me how to properly use the laminator. And my name badge got sucked into the laminating machine, and I had to rip the cord out of the wall while my face was very close to the 2 very large rolls. And there was nobody around to rescue me. And I was like 24. And I had a panic attack in the art room closet while I almost laminated myself to death. And I should have known then that AAC was more than lamination. But alas, I did not. So
well, I'm glad you made it.
Wow. Yeah, that was before sneeze pee post children. Otherwise, there definitely would have been one of those.
Exactly.
Yes.
But Michelle, I want to let you know that where you were was exactly where I was at the beginning as well.
Yes.
And that's such a good thing to bring out, is what comes intuitively isn't necessarily what the research says and what's going to move things along the fastest. So we kind of have to get out of our heads a little bit and really dig deep into the research and look beyond what comes intuitively.
Yes. And you told me that, and I will never forget there sitting in your office surrounded by these amazing devices and contraptions that I didn't even know existed. And you told me, you were like, if there's been a mistake, I have made it. I have done it and I have learned from it.
Oh, I've done it more than once too.
But yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the ones I've done even recently and kind of like, yeah, but that endeared me to it, that because this is scary. For me personally, using an AAC device is actually scarier than treating a kid with an oral pharyngeal dysphagia, because I have to convince everybody in their family and their surroundings and my colleagues that are treating at the school district that they should all buy into what sometimes the first time the child's ever worked with like a speech generating device. And you gave me hope. So full disclosure, folks, been there, done wrong. So did Dr. Carol. We can all learn.
Yeah. Oh, I still make, it still happens. But the thing is, when it does happen, you can't fall into that definition of craziness and keep doing things over and over and expecting a different result. You got to try something else. And what is that thing we're going to try? We got to go to the research. What does the research say that we need to try?
Before we get into the pre-populated questions that you and I have already talked about, do you have a favorite resource that you like to go to?
Right now, I've made my own little quick cheat sheet called AAC Basics that I give out to a lot of people, that just has like the highlights just to get their feet wet, help them put their big toe in the water, and kind of get them familiar with, just basics of where to start.
Is there any way that I could ask you for a copy of that to share?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Well, when we're done, if you can email me that, then I'll get it added to my website, and then folks can have another way to access that. Okay. Thank you.
That would be awesome.
Yes. Okay. So then, all right. So then let's get to it, because you and I could squirrel all day long. All right. So one of the first things that you enlightened me to, which in retrospect, wow, this is humble pie. What specifically do you mean by core vocabulary, and why is it so vital to augmentative communication?
Right. And core vocabulary is well studied at this point by many people. And it is those 300 to 400 words that we say every day throughout the day that make up about 80% of what we say. And what's the big deal about that? Like, why do we care about these core vocabulary words? And the truth is that we've got to start putting words in front of the kids that they can use, and adults that they can use every day throughout the day. And so it's not just core vocabulary, but then there's also something called fringe vocabulary. And fringe vocabulary makes up about the other 20%. And those are words that are pretty unique to the individual. And that's going to show what people's likes and dislikes are, and what hobbies they have, and favorite things they have. And those will definitely complement the core words that are used. But what's neat about the core words is, once they're identified, we're kind of good to go, because what my core words are, Michelle, are the same core words that you have, and the same core words that, the next person has. So that we know if we are working with core words, we're definitely on the right track. The fringe words are going to be unique to the individual. And so that's part of our assessment, to figure out what those vocabulary words would be to complement the core vocabulary words.
Okay. So the first time you said this, you provided me a handout. I think it was the PRC core vocab. It was like the first 100 words. I think you gave it to me years ago. And what came up, I don't know, months later, my mother-in-law was in visiting, and she was a special education teacher. And she's like, "You have Dolge reader words." I was like, what are you saying? Because I never had literacy embedded in my graduate training. So it just wasn't a big crux of what I was taught. But the first 150, 200, 300 words from that core vocab correspond immediately to the first, what is the Dolge primer? Isn't that 300 words?
Yeah.
Yep.
200, I thought, but yeah, and they overlap beautifully.
Yes. So, folks, we're talking about verbs and prepositions. The first words kids learn are actions. Kids are, for lack of a better phrase, the little Charlie Brown cartoon character that's covered in dirt, that kind of the dirt cloud follows him. That's what little people are like. They are emotion. So up, down, in, out, help, yes, no, go, stop, want, eat, drink. Those are some of the first core vocab words that I know I use with my special babies, like Monday through Friday. Now, fringe vocab, an example of fringe vocab at the current moment in Pac Dawson, the 3-year-old is really into Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman is probably said several hundred times a day. So that would be one of our unique fringe words. But what I like, I have actually had patients come in and sit down and have an assessment with Dr. Carroll to give me guidance, because I need to know where to go, especially if the child has a cortical vision impairment or a seizure disorder or fluctuating baselines, like what we look like 3 days a week might be higher than what we look the other few days of the week. You take time to ask about their ADLs, what they do in the course of the day and what they love, to kind of guide the discovery of the fringe. And you do it very, like you're just having a conversation. It's very cool to watch.
Well, and it's so important too, because that's going to be very motivating. And you brought up so many things in just what you said. I mean, first you were talking about the Dolch words, and I would like to talk a little bit more about that. And I have a really great core vocabulary board. It wasn't created by me, but it's the first 36 core words that are also Dolch words. And it is just a low-tech board that I'll be glad to send to you too.
I think I have that one on my website. Is that the color block one where it says,
yes,
like, I want you and the pronouns are on the left?
Yes. What's so great about promoting literacy with AAC? I mean, we just dove right into this, but I can't stress working on literacy at the same time as AAC enough. One, you do it without knowing it because it overlaps so beautifully with the Dolch words. And then two, that is our big hope for all of these kids. Our number one goal with AAC is that they will actually be verbal enough to not need it anymore. And then if they still need it, our goal is that they would be literate, so they would be able to spell anything they wanted to say and not have to rely on the pictures. So relying on the pictures is fine, but it's limiting. Once you can spell, you can say anything you want. So, when we're thinking about down the road, which I always do, I'm like, okay, here's this child today, but what are they going to look like when they graduate from high school? And what is that goal that we're working towards? And so, literacy has to be a big part of that. And the other piece of that too is so often, not 100%, but so often school teachers are not really wild about being part of the communication plan. And we really want them to be part of that. And so letting them know, hey, this device is helping you teach literacy is going to definitely draw them in and make them part of that communication team around the child.
Yep. I feel like for a lot of, especially our rural school districts, they are afraid of venturing into the world of a higher tech speech generating device because of the inherent cost in the device. But I know in South Carolina, we have a couple of resources that are available to offset that cost. One, the patient's private insurance can pay for it. I know that you've personally guided numerous speech pathologists and assistive tech teams through the process, especially for like the private rehab. We also have something that I just found out about, Amplify Life, for a child that's 5 and older, that will for free provide a communication device and app, if appropriate.
An iPad and
iPad.
one app.
Yes.
And it's in an OtterBox case. Yes.
Yes. And then, but before they get to that point of this is the device, this is the app, communication app that we need, folks can, across our state, check out a device from you for free for, and I'll slap my hand because I am personally horrendous at this, for a 2-week time period. Again, slap my hand. But it's available to trial. And when I've been to other states have this option as well. So there's options there such that if you work in a rural area, you can still feel your hands are not tied by that financial hindrance. There's options around. And then don't y'all have a program where that folks can donate devices to get checked and loan to, what is that program? I can't remember the name of the program that you have. Y'all have more than communication devices. You can even.
Oh, yes.
What is that called?
You mean for the medical equipment?
Yes. I can't remember.
Yes. The reuse program.
Okay. Reuse. Yes. I just brain farted and I couldn't remember the name of. But so folks, if you're listening and you have a device that a patient no longer uses, they've outgrown, they've advanced, I know the Assistive Tech here in South Carolina will gladly accept it. But if there's something local, share. As my grandma would say, pass it on down the line.
Exactly. Yeah. So we take in medical equipment, and included in that is communication devices that people don't want to use anymore because they've gotten a new one or they don't need it anymore. Whatever reason, we take it in, we get it all cleaned up. We take it back to factory standards. And then I find a new owner for it. And the people we find for owners for these devices are people who have no funding, absolutely no way of getting these devices on their own. And so, this is like a really important thing people can do for another person.
I think that's awesome. Okay, before I forgot, we had to speak to that joy for a moment. Okay, so now one thing that I remember coming in and telling you with such pride that I had worked so hard to photograph and laminate, and this time I didn't die, so that's exciting, but photograph and laminate a patient's toys, every single toy that this child had in their house. And that particular little fella had a demyelinating genetic condition such that as his body expanded, as the nerve cell expanded, the myelin sheath didn't keep up. So his physical skill set continued to atrophy as he became older. And I was so proud that I had gone to all this effort because he could pull that laminated picture out of that little notebook and communicate to his family as to what he wanted. Granted, he also had to be able to flip multiple pages because he had a lot of toys. He was a very fortunate child. And you smiled and you said, okay, well, what if he doesn't want to play with the toy? And I was like, I don't really have a good response for that one. So that was one moment in time, but I thought I was following what was taught to me 15 years ago as best practice for the picture exchange communication system. And then just recently we came across an event where a local family that was also receiving services in the schools was told that they could not have a referral for a speech generating device until they reached a certain level on by using the picture exchange communication system. And you were very polite and shared with me, and we ended up passing the information out, a patient's communication bill of rights. So can you explain best practice as it pertains to picture exchange and what exactly is a communication bill of rights?
Right. And the communication bill of rights I've actually reproduced. I definitely gave credit, that comes from the American Speech and Hearing Association and the National Joint Commission on People with Disabilities. And they came up with a Bill of Communication Rights. And it basically says if you're breathing, you and you're nonverbal, you have a right to a communication system. There's no waiting. And they even go through talking about it's so much more than just, that you're able to make choices. So, a lot of people think, oh, I just need to give them two choices and we're done. And it's so much more than that. So one of the things, I'm pulling it up right now, it's the right to interact socially. The first right is to interact socially, maintain social closeness and build relationships, which is the very essence of being human, is to be social and have social closeness. And then to make choices, not just of objects, but of actions and events and also people. And then the right to refuse or reject things. So important. I can't tell you how many communication systems I've seen where the individual does not have yes/no vocabulary on their communication system, and they're not able to produce that with their body in a traditional sense. But what I hear is that there are like major meltdowns and things like that. So we definitely want these individuals to have a way to appropriately refuse or say no. Because if we don't give them an appropriate way to do it, they will find other ways to do it. And that's pinching, hitting, biting, slapping, kicking, you name it. Those are all the things we want to avoid. So we've got to give them an appropriate way to do it.
Kids can learn to say stop, especially when they're going through OT and PT and they're getting stretched and it hurts. The ability for a child to say stop. And I've gone so far as to put on a communication device the option to say knock with the word off nearby, so they can, try to say knock it off. We built up to the word it, but probably wrong, but that's what we did. But being able to tell an older brother to knock it off. Yep.
Yeah. Or I don't like, or I don't like you, and things kids say to each other. Yes. That's all part of core vocabulary. And the other thing, they have the right to make comments and have opinions, which a lot of these individuals aren't given opportunities to comment on things or to express opinions. So that's really important to being a human. And then also to be able to give people information and also to be able to ask for information. Again, I've worked with teenagers who had very extensive and very complicated electronic equipment, communication devices, and they did not have one question word on the whole communication device. And so they had no way to ask what or why or anything. They just went through life constantly being told what to do and never being able to inquire about their environment or what was going on. So they have the right to have interventions. And as soon as a disability is identified, that marks their right to start intervention as soon as possible. And then they have the right to have the Communication Acts acknowledged. And that's huge because when somebody with a communication device relays a message, as a communication partner, we need to let them know we receive the message in whatever way makes sense. So if a child says, I want a cookie, and it is not time for them to have a cookie, or they just ate 100 cookies, I need to let them know I heard that by saying, no, it's not there. It's not time to have a cookie. I might pull out a clock and show them in 2 hours you can have a cookie, or show a picture of what they're having for dinner, and after they eat their hamburger they can have a cookie or whatever, and have a discussion about cookie. But ignoring it is not the appropriate response to somebody using a communication device. And then the right to be treated with dignity and addressed with respect and courtesy. And there's one video I show when I do my trainings, and it's this little girl, and her teacher says, "What do you want people to know about you?" And she uses her communication device, and she says, "I want people to talk to me normal and not baby talk to me." So important for kids. They know when they're being talked down to, and they really do want to be treated with the same dignity that their peers are treated with. And then the right to be addressed directly and not spoken for or talked about in the third person. And oh my goodness, as professionals, how many times do we do this? And just any way we can do to avoid it. And the way to avoid it is by giving the individual who's nonverbal a communication device. And then also the right to have meaningful and culturally appropriate communication. So if somebody is from a different culture than the professional is from, the professional needs to find out what is appropriate for that culture and to make sure it's reflected in the communication system and that we're responding in an appropriate way. So that's the Bill of Rights in a nutshell. Definitely, you would want to check out that handout on Michelle's website, and you can see even more. But you can see this isn't anything that we don't ask of somebody who's verbal. And basically, we're saying all the rights that a verbal person enjoys is available for people who are nonverbal. That's all we're saying.
This podcast is brought to you by SpeechTherapyPD.com. SpeechTherapyPD.com is an engaging, evidence-based continuing education site that offers over 450 continuing education hours. The best part? The information garnered can be applied in therapy immediately. It's functional and fabulous, without the hassle of trying to translate technical jargon from a research article. Can I entice you more? Well, then get your suntan lotion ready, because next summer, SpeechTherapyPD.com is hosting a CEU cruise. That's right. July 27th through August 3rd of 2019, the amazing, delightful, and oh-so-kind Shar Boshart, MACCC SLP, will be the featured speaker for 12-plus continuing education hours on a cruise ship through Greece. That's right. You heard it right. Greece. Want to get the preview or want to catch a preview of the information she's going to share? Then tune into her pod course, The Speech Link, which is also eligible for continuing education through SpeechTherapyPD.com. Maybe, oh just maybe, I'll see y'all in Greece.
Okay, so before we segue over to the PECS component, if a treating clinician were to feel that for whatever reason their hands were tied and that their student or their patient's communication bill of rights was being violated. I mean, we both know I'm a bull in China shop. So I just go in all guns a-blazing, and I'm not very good at not being me. But, you catch more flies with honey, which is actually not true. I grew up in the country. You catch more flies with beer. But how would you recommend working to resolve that issue with grace and tact?
That is a very good question. And one way you can do it is talk about how it's going to benefit the person who is saying, no, they don't need a communication device. So if it's a teacher, we're going to point out that this is going to help teach them literacy. It's actually going to help the teacher with teaching. It's going to help the child participate. Sometimes it's a different strategy. We had a high school teacher that told a student in her general education classroom that she wasn't going to call her on her anymore because it took the student too long to make her message on her communication device. And at first glance, that sounds terrible, but then, really, we got in there talking about it, and she wasn't a bad person. She just didn't understand how augmentative communication works. And so what we did was come up with different strategies for that situation so that the student could still participate in class, but the teacher wasn't losing a lot of time by waiting for the message to be created. And so it kind of it helps to take a step back and to figure out how we can make this a positive experience for everybody. So it does take some out of the box thinking.
And explanation, education. What I have found is if I simply educate, and not in a Michelle Dawson woof, mode, but in like, okay, hey, did you hear about this? Like a seek to understand. We open more doors that
Right.
way. But that has,
Yes.
I am still a work in progress on that one, friend.
Yeah. And two, mainly people think it's overwhelming. So how can I explain the very basics without it being overwhelming? And one thing I try to do is find out one thing they're willing to do different. And that's the goal. And once they get that down pat, then we can add on other things. But finding that little niche of compliance. What are they willing to do that's going to move the child forward with their communication skills? Not sometimes this all goes very easily, and sometimes it is a multiple conversation outcome.
Was that 3 degrees of change? And that what that's called?
Yes.
Yes, that's okay. We fight the good fight, stay in there. 3 degrees of change, and or getting tiny hammers or multiple hammers. We can change the world. Yes. Okay.
Well, a very wise speech language pathologist told me one time that everybody needs to hear something X number of times before they understand it, before they can carry it out. And my X is different than everybody else's X. And I might need to hear something 4 times on one issue and 5 times on another issue. So you just never know.
That is a wise SLP. That was not me. I don't know who that was, but that's a good woman. I assume woman. That's sexist. It could have been a man. Okay. All right. So then the question I want to know about, the one that we've beaten around the bush. Talk to me about the noun approach with the picture exchange and why that approach is no longer evidence-based.
Well, and honestly, the Picture Exchange Communication System company has done lots of research that shows it's very efficacious. So let me just start with that. But I would like to say there's other research that points in different ways. And one of the things is that I rarely hear that this is a 6-phase training program. I rarely hear anybody getting as far as phase 5. And usually people are at phase 4, where the child is creating sentences with I want, and then they finish the sentence with a noun. And the books that are written about PEC says, please include core vocabulary, please have all these small words in addition to the nouns. And if people did that, we'd get a little bit closer to the mark. There's other issues that we have to be concerned about. But the bottom line is when I see PEC's notebooks, they are I want and tons of nouns. And I even had somebody come in last week and I said, how many nouns are in there? I said, is it between 25 and 50? Because my experience is once it gets to be between 25 and 50 nouns, that's when things start to break down. And sure enough, it was just over 25 pictures of nouns. So there's a couple of things, nouns are fringe vocabulary typically. And so fringe vocabulary should be 20%. So the words I and the word want are core vocabulary. And so the percentages in most PEC books are the way they're constructed by people are in reverse as to what the research says. So on a good communication device that's going to promote language and promote communication, it's going to be about 80% of the words are going to be core vocabulary. In PEC's notebooks, I'm seeing 20% of the words are core vocabulary. On a communication device that's built for language and communication, The fringe vocabulary is 20%, but on a core vocabulary, on a PECS notebook, that fringe vocabulary takes up 80%. So the percentages are reversed. So right off the bat, that's always a concern for me, that we're not offering enough core vocabulary with PECS, even though you are more than welcome to put those core vocabulary words on PECS, on your PEC notebooks, and that would be great. The other thing that happens, and we really haven't touched on this yet, so I'm going to introduce it, and that is that on a PECS notebook, usually the pictures don't stay in the original spot they're located. And so pictures are taken off, put on the sentence strip, then the sentence strip is dismantled and the pictures are put on different pages in the book, or if they're put on consistent pages, they might be in a different spot. And OTs will tell you, OTs love me when I say this, because this is such an OT thing, but motor memory is what makes us do things quickly. And to have motor memory means things need to be left in the same spot all the time. And so that's where we were talking about, Michelle, when you were saying start where you want to end up. Like if the word I is in the upper left-hand corner, day one, you need to make sure it's in the upper left-hand corner on the last day you use the device too. Like it cannot move. And a good example of how motivating this is especially thinking about kids with autism. So many of them love sameness. There's nothing same about the PECS notebook from one day to the next. The content's the same, but the positioning is not the same. And why is motor memory so important? It's because I've seen kids with autism and then another young man with a vision impairment who are able to use these devices without looking at them. And they're able to use them really quickly. And that is awesome. That's what we want them to do. That's great. The only way they can do that is where everything stays in the same place from day one to the end. And so think about this in terms of your keyboard at your computer. And when you learned how to type, if you had formal typing lessons, your 8 fingers went on the home row keys. And they, whatever your right hand did, your left hand did. And those keys, even though we didn't use the whole keyboard, we started with the home row keys, and those keys stayed in the exact same place. Now, imagine most people type at about 60 to 80 words a minute. What if we were to take your keyboard away and say, hey, I'm going to give you this other keyboard, and I've moved all the letters around, and I've added letters, and I think you're going to do so much better with this one. And that's what we do with communication boards. Well, no one would put up with that new keyboard. A lot of people would just say, forget it. I want my old keyboard. I don't want to learn this new keyboard. It's too hard. And that's the way kids are as well. And so the other way of keeping things the same from the first day until the end, people tend to start with, and I used to do this, and not only did I used to do it great, and I would start with 2 big messages, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16, and then 32, but every time you do that, the messages move around. And so even if you start with 32 squares, you might choose to start with just 4 pictures showing. And if it's an electronic device, you would be able to hide all the pictures except for 4 of them, but make sure those 4 pictures always stay there, that they don't move. And then as time goes on, you can unhide pictures, or if it's low tech, you can add pictures until you fill up all 32 blocks. And that's what we mean by starting where you want to end up. And part of that is being, really being optimistic about the progress the individual is going to make with these communication systems. So when people, just start out with very few, I'm always the one pushing, no, let's think bigger than that. Let's think that they're going to gain more language, more vocabulary than that. And to, create an atmosphere of expectation of growth and learning.
The only thing I could think of the entire time you were talking is, one, you're brilliant, and two, did the millennial generation that's listening learn to take keyboarding? Because all I could think was the analogy would be, when you learn to text rapid fire on your cell phone.
There you go.
Yes. Now,
yes,
I have had parents ask me the question, but she's not even looking at it. I had one dad that would get so frustrated because, the child had a rare genetic syndrome, and the capacity for verbosity from a verbal, manual, spoken perspective was significantly delayed, as was all other gross and fine motor skill set. But when it came to the AAC device, she was capable of doing 3 and 4 word utterances rapid fire, but she would look at the speaker and not at the board. And Dad would say, I want her to look at her words. And then he would get frustrated that the images, the picture icons that went with the word were like abstract. They didn't make sense in his frame of reference. I'm thinking like the picture for where was actually a t-shirt instead of the question where. And I said, well, and that was not my doing. That was the design of the app. Also, I apologize that Chewbacca Dawson is partaking in the podcast, but working furry mom problems. But I explained it's muscle memory. The beautiful thing is that your daughter knows, and she wants to seek your out attention. She is making that eye contact with you so that she is speaking to you. She's engaging with her communication partner. But
exactly
that can be a hard sell for parents that want them to look at what they're doing in order to learn. And that's one that I still personally struggle with communicating that to families. One thing that you talked about was a cortical vision impairment. And honestly, we're not going to have time to cover that today, but you do so much with and have taught me so much about a cortical vision impairment and how their field of vision from one day may not be the same on the next day. And technology and stuff like that. So I'm going to throw you under the bus and say, can we do a follow-up just on eye gaze and cortical vision impairments? Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Okay, well then.
Can I, we left off one thing, Michelle. Can I go over one more thing?
Yes.
I realized one of the things we didn't talk about was aided language stimulation.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Which is a big fancy word that's just referring to modeling. And this is where we want teachers, speech language pathologists, brother, sister, the aide in the classroom, whoever the communication partner is, to use the student's communication system to talk to them. Because just like we model speech to get kids to speak, we need to model communication devices to get them to use communication devices. And aided language stimulation is showing so much promise, and it's definitely to be used in a natural environment. And while we're talking about natural environments, an unnatural environment would be testing a child on their communication device. And I always tell people, if you want to turn that child off about using their communication device, just start testing them. And that means you would say, where's the message on? Where is, places? Where is this? Where is that? And you're having them locate things. So, or identify pictures, what is this? And they're supposed to somehow tell you it's drink, or to match pictures with objects. All of those things just aren't very productive. But doing aided language stimulation where you're modeling how to use the device while you're talking to the child in a natural environment is going to get things moving as quickly as they will move. So that's the ideal circumstance.
Folks, when I do the aided language stimulation, if I have a kid that's having a knockdown, drag them out, they are mad, then I get on whatever their AAC device, and there's one app that I tend to use more predominantly, and I say, I feel mad. And then I'm stomping my feet right next to the kid. And normally the children that I'm working with are on the spectrum, but it's really interesting because all of a sudden they see me modeling it on the device and I'm having the hissy fit to mimic their hissy fit. They stop, they look at Miss Michelle. She has lost her mind. And but you know what? The kid will then turn around and say, I mad, or a variation, I feel, or I feel mad. And I'm like, yes, Bubby, that's how you feel. You're allowed to be mad. You wanted that. And it's funny how you say cookie. I try not to do cookies with my kiddos, but one little boy that I saw this morning, he likes this potato naan bread that his family makes. And that is a unique French word and not readily available on those pre-programmed tablets out there. But cultural competency 101, we're working that in as the fringe, but he's mad. He didn't want to eat his naan bread this morning. Okay. All right. We only have 5 minutes left in today. And I do want to bring you back for the one on the eye gaze and the cortical vision impairments. But I have often felt like I'm the solo ship steering or pushing for an AAC device, especially in my little home health world where we're all naturally isolated. But I'm not it. I'm not the AAC team. There's more involved in that. So who else would you say is on the child's augmentative communication team?
When it comes to augmentative communication, I always say the speech language pathologist is the coach for everybody. So you are the coach, Michelle, and the funding requester. So other people on the team are definitely the parents. Siblings can definitely be on the team. Other family members, grandparents, awesome. People in the community, if that makes sense, people at church or, what other community places you go to.
In line at Chick-fil-A.
Yes.
Sorry.
And
Chick-fil-A.
Even other parents you go on play dates with or something like that, they would be on the team too. Definitely people in the school. I've worked with some kids, getting them into, natural environments where, we go into the media center and we're working on greeting the media specialist so we can ask a question. And so, the media specialist can even be on the team. So all the adults that are a part of this child's life are definitely on the team. The doctors on the team, the OT, PT, any other therapists are on the team. Yep. Any other communication partner would be on the team. And the speech language pathologist is always asking people, please model how to use the device. Let's make sure, there's core vocabulary in there in addition to their fringe vocabulary, and promoting language whenever we can in natural environments.
Now, in the early intervention home health world, we are isolated, and that sucks. Like, let's just acknowledge how much that is a disadvantage, especially when you don't work at a clinic and you can't just pop down the hall and say, hey, so-and-so, can you come see what Susie Q, Billy Bob Thornton's doing? So one quick strategy that I have used to overcome that is I have the patient's caregivers take cell phone videos of me on their cell phone. What we're doing, I'm talking to the camera as if I'm given a little mini, this is kind of what you want to go for. This is how we're using it. And then I have them play it to the other therapist. And we relay information back and forth that way. Plus, what I have found is if I have the mom record me working with the child and the child sees themselves, we're vain by nature, people. Humans are vain. And the kid loves to watch what they're doing, and they'll imitate and replicate whatever target phrase or, core vocab we've introduced. It increases the child's progress because it's an easy carryover, like a home exercise program strategy for the family too. But
very motivating.
Yes. So, Now, I mean, I do ask families not to throw me all over like YouTube or something like that, but so find your realm of, comfortability with this, but that can be a great resource.
Yeah. I mean, video is always a great resource. And, even to videotape the parents interacting with the child, where it's their turn to talk to the child and you would videotape it and then sit down and watch it together.
Yep.
And have the mom videotape you. Absolutely. It can go both ways. Jennifer Kent Walsh, she's with the University of Central Florida, and she came up with a great program that included a lot of video taping to train parents. And if anybody wants a copy of that, I can send it to them. But or you could just look it up. But it's parent training, and the author is Jennifer Kent Walsh. I believe it's 2015 or something like that.
Okay, now I know we're always. I feel like I do this whenever I pop by your office. I like word vomit a problem at you like on the fly, and then you just 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, we've resolved it. But yay! But if a person has additional questions, or if they live locally and they want to troubleshoot a case with you, or if they want to make a donation, how should they reach out to you in the Assistive Technology Office?
Okay, please call Carol Page at the South Carolina Assistive Technology Program. And if you have an old communication device you want to donate, I'm definitely interested in it. And you would just call me at 803-935-5301, or you can email me at Carol, CAROL.Page, PAGE, at uscmed.sc.edu.
Thank you. Oh my heavens. You're like, I love you. You know that. You're just, by being you have made our little Palmetto State better in so very, very many ways. And I am so grateful for you and your walk and your work. So
it definitely takes a village for these kids. So it's not anything anybody can do by themselves. So thank you, Michelle, for being out there and advocating for these kids like you do.
That lightning rod thing my dad keeps telling me. Okay. Well, on that note, we're almost out of time. And apparently a fur beast on here needs to go get walked really quickly. So before we switch over to questions, I just want to wish some dear friends out there a slightly early but very happy Hanukkah. And Dr. Carol, if you'll hold on 2 seconds, I'm going to switch us over to the question line. So hold on 1 second.
That's a wrap, folks. Once again, thank you for listening to First Bite, fed, fun, and functional. I am your humble but yet sassy host, Michelle Dawson, the All Things Peds SLP. This podcast is part of a course offered for continuing education through speechtherapypd.com. Please check out the website if you'd like to learn more about CEU opportunities for this episode, as well as the ones that are archived. And as always, remember, feed your mind, feed your soul, be kind, and feed those babies.